confirm reports of some unidentified flying objects in your area.
Roger, should be approximately, there was approximately 5 to 7 objects, green, red, and white flashing lights.
From Edwards.
And Sightings has also obtained still photographs of an Edwards Air Force Base radar screen taken on the day of the incident. They clearly show radar returns from the unidentified objects.
Got those 3 little dots out there, and they say that there are 3 definite objects. It's not weather, it's not clutter.
Okay, they've finally gotten that UFO officer at Edwards out of that, and he said yes, he would like to have a look. We're getting plenty of live data as visuals on these things about 40 miles south of Edwards, several of them.
At the radar screen in the Edwards Tower that night was Air Force Tech Sergeant Chuck Sorrells. He's not spoken publicly about the incident for more than 30 years, until now.
Looking back now, what do you think it was? You've had 30 years to sort of think about it and wonder.
I've thought about it on a lot of occasions. I know it was not an aircraft. I know it was not a helicopter. I know it was not a weather balloon. I know a lot of things it was not. It was not anything that we know of as a flying object that could do the maneuvers that this did. And what it was, I do not know.
Soon after Sorrell started his shift, he alerted his superiors to the mysterious objects hovering and darting about the base. Objects shown on this Air Force photograph of his radar screen. The decision was made to scramble an F-106 alert bird.
Edwards, do you still have any of these UFOs in sight?
Yes.
Okay, Tower, pick out one you want us to intercept, and we'll take a 0-1 in on him.
The chase was on, but the pilot faced a formidable challenge.
That thing is rising.
Tower, how's things look now?
He's low. Look, search high, search high.
It doesn't search high.
Search very high. The thing is rising. It's rising rapidly.
We're at 40,000 feet.
Still low.
Search high.
The F-106 pilot, when he went up there, did you think he ever had a chance of catching up?
The way it rose, as fast as it went up in altitude and he passed under it at 40,000 feet, not a prayer. Not a prayer, not a chance.
It was a mismatch.
Oh, completely. There ain't no way he could have caught that thing.
Some people involved in the UFO community believe that these tapes, what happened to you that night, proves that UFOs exist.
I don't dispute that, not in the least. I think what we're going to find out now that the Cold War is over, that you're going to get more and more of these, what has been classified over the years, released, and they're going to be able to reach some kind of a conclusion as to what we have seen.
Because sightings like these often lead to ridicule, Sorrells is relieved to learn after so many years that there are other eyewitnesses and hours of audio tape to back up his story.
I don't like to be the only one saying these type things.
There's one point on that tape that struck me, and it's when you said, I don't want to be the only one seeing this stuff.
Yes. You know, if you're the only guy in the whole world that saw this thing, then how in the world is anybody going to believe you? You know, I mean, you're the crazy. But if you can get another half dozen people, it's not so bad.
In fact, 700 international scientists and engineers were at Edwards that night. Many believe it was more than just a coincidence.
They were there on Edwards for a conference at the time. And I've always kind of wondered, well, did they come there to put on a show for the scientists, or was they there trying to find out what the scientists were doing? I don't know. But it was just kind of strange that they decided to show up that night as opposed to some other night.
Do you believe in UFOs, extraterrestrials?
I think the possibility very strongly exists that, yes, there is something beyond what we know.
Does it make any sense to you what it could possibly be?
No, we're in as much of a dark light as you are.
Ночью в 0 часов вблизи города Самара на военном радиолокационном объекте был зафиксирован радарами вот такой треугольный предмет. От него исходили вверх лучи. Этот предмет приземлился вблизи этой станции и неожиданно исчезли 2 часовых. Когда они вернулись через 1,5-2 часа, то на оружии оказались стертыми номера. Радиолокационные средства зафиксировали этот объект. Потом он распался на отдельные части, очень яркие, и специалисты утверждают, что это отражение от каких-то материальных предметов, чуть ли не с кобальтовым покрытием. Далее этот объект приземлился, и в ответ на прощупывание его радарами он выпустил мощный импульс в сторону антенны локатора и сжег ее. Антенна была разрушена, возник большой переполох на военном объекте, антенна горела, локатор был разрушен, часовые пропали. Полное сенсационное событие на военном секретном объекте вблизи города Самары. Когда вернулись пропавшие солдаты, когда объект улетел, обнаружили, что на поле, где он приземлился, был помят большой огород. Какой-то мощный объемный взрыв или мощный объемный пресс повлиял на поверхность земли и на растения.
The Samara incident was witnessed by a Soviet officer named Rudzit. In this newly released Russian documentary, Rudzit's face is hidden because at the time of the interview, he feared he'd be court-martialed for speaking publicly.
I saw with my own eyes the antenna destroyed by an explosion. It was due to a very strong blow from without. I saw burnt paint and melted metal parts of the antenna and also reduction gears scattered all around.
I had a camera crew filming a precision landing system we were putting in on our dry lake bed at Edwards Air Force Base.
Which year it was?
1957. 1957. This camera crew had both the still camera and movie camera, and they were filming the work that had been done on the installation.
So there were a few cameras that registered.
Yeah.
Там были несколько камер, которые
They were holding cameras and filming. And a saucer came right in over their head. Put down 3 little landing gear.
And did you observe yourself this?
No, I was in the office about 2 blocks away. They started walking over towards the saucer, filming all the time.
There were a few objects or only one?
One.
Один объект.
As they got quite close, he lifted up, put the gear up into the gear well.
Затем он слегка приподнялся, вобрал в себя эти самые ноги, подогнул их и стремительно шел наверх.
They came back into my office. The cameraman came in my office, told me what had happened. I told him to get the film developed as soon as they possibly.
Я приказал как можно скорее проявить пленку.
And then I had to look up in our Air Force regulation book.
Затем я заглянул, так сказать, в наши секретные книги, инструкции, что с этим надо делать.
And call headquarters and find out what to do. And I was told that when the film came back to my desk, that there would be a man there to put it in a courier pouch, and that our commander's own personal jet was standing by to carry it to Washington. I looked at the film. It was excellent film. The negatives were beautiful. Put it in the pouch and sent it to Washington. Now, 2 weeks ago...
Затем, 2 weeks after that...
2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks past, about 2 weeks past, a gentleman called me and said, due to our Freedom of Information Act, that he had gotten copies of this film after all these years, and it's now available. And
so it was only 2 weeks ago when this copy could be available.
Yeah.
Did you see them?
No, I haven't yet.
Can you describe what did you see at these negatives of these copies? What was there?
There were pictures of this saucer coming in, standing in the landing gear, touching down on them. And then there were pictures of him lifting out, putting the gear back up.
Затем было видно достаточно хорошо, как тарелка приподнималась, подгибались ноги, и, значит, как она уходила наверх. It was all clear, visible, yeah?
Yeah.
And so you did see that just after it landed, yeah?
Yeah.
Just it was minutes after it all happened, when they developed the film and gave it to you. Mm-hmm. But it was evident that it was technical construction.
Right.
It was not anything smooth, smeared, not a plasma sheath, not was some kind of definitely deliberately produced construction.
Looked like just a metal aluminum or stainless or
Он выглядел,
platinum or something.
он выглядел как четко металлический metal. That means it was really shining, or
Yeah, it was shiny. It was shiny.
It was in 1973 when I was vice president at Gray Advertising, and I took time out and went to Norton Air Force Base to explore subjects for television specials related to the Defense Department. While discussing several of the subjects, UFOs came up, and Paul here told us about a film of a landing of alien crafts at Holloman Air Force Base about 3 years earlier.
What did you see, Mr. Shuttle?
I saw footage of 3 dish-shaped crafts. One of the craft landed and 2 of them went away.
Why did it land?
It appeared to be in trouble because it oscillated all the way down to the ground. However, it did land on 3 pods. A sliding door opened, a ramp was extended, and out came 3 aliens.
What did they look like?
Well, they were human-sized. They had odd gray complexion and a pronounced nose. They wore tight-fitting jumpsuits, thin headdresses that appeared to be communication devices, and in their hands, they held a translator, I was told. A Holloman base commander and other Air Force officers went out to meet him.
Mr. Shuttle, what did your superior officers tell you?
I was told it was theatrical footage the Air Force has purchased to make a training film.
Well, that sounds plausible, doesn't it?
Well, if it were a theatrical film, why didn't I have a record of this? It was my job to keep accurate records of all audiovisual purchases.
Is there any other reason that you feel this was not a theatrical film?
Yes, it was too real. The people who were shooting that day were Air Force personnel. Lucky for us, the day they were shooting, they were doing an acceleration test.
It's too bad we couldn't get that footage from the Air Force.
Remote-controlled cameras monitor the 7,700 square miles of airspace above the Nellis Range. The cameras record fighter jet training, tactical exercises, and in at least one case, this UFO. The video, from a tracking location known only as S-30, was fed into Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. Personnel there monitor what is supposed to be classified data about aircraft runs over the 3 million acres of desert that make up the Nellis Range.
This craft shows up, and it's like they're playing with kids. It's like, do whatever they want and buy now. That's scary.
I've never seen anything like this before. This was my first encounter seeing anything of this nature. And I've been working the ranges for close to 10 years.
It seemed to move in whichever direction it wanted to go whenever it wanted to, contrary to any aircraft that I've seen in the past.
I was in the Air Force active duty after I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1964 until 1971 and separated as a captain. In March of 1967, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, as a missile launch officer, Minuteman missiles. On an early morning of March 16th, 1967, I got a call from my security guard, primary security guard upstairs. We had about 6, as I recall, flight security airmen upstairs. I was downstairs 60 feet underground in a capsule monitoring and controlling 10 nuclear-tipped Minuteman missiles. I got a call that morning that they were seeing strange lights flying in the sky. I disregarded that call, told them to call me when something more significant happened. I got another call subsequent to that call, and this time it was a more intense tone in the guard's voice. It was very clearly very frightened. He said there was a bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. He had all the other guards out there with their weapons drawn. Right after that call, I woke up my commander, who was on a rest period, Fred Mywald, a retired colonel now, and told him about the phone calls. As I was telling him about the phone calls, my weapons started going down, one after the other. They went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable. We lost somewhere between 6 and 8 weapons that morning. within minutes of having received that second phone call of a UFO hovering outside the front gate. Again, that morning, after reporting it to the command post, we were informed that a very similar incident happened at Echo Flight. I was at Oscar Flight. They lost all 10 of their weapons under similar circumstances, very similar circumstances, where UFOs were sighted over the launch facilities. They had maintenance crews and security crews out there that had spent the night, and they were reporting UFOs over those sites. And the commander of that flight was Eric Carlson. He also separated as a captain, and the deputy commander was Walt Fiegel. They retired as a lieutenant colonel. We have those witnesses that I just mentioned, the names I just mentioned, have spoken of this event before, and they will back up this story. We also have documentation that I received through FOA requests from the Air Force outlining the Echo Flight incident, and including in that documentation a reference to UFOs. We have telexes covering this incident, and in one telex it says the fact that no apparent reason for the loss of 10 missiles can be readily identified is cause for grave concern to this headquarters. This was from SAC headquarters. So we've got those telexes. I've got about 12 witnesses that'll verify parts of this story, including of a man who investigated the incident afterwards for the Air Force, and you'll hear a little bit more about that from the next witness. And also another guard that witnessed a UFO in that same time period, and another officer who retired a full colonel who had other reports of UFOs. Ancillary to that, excuse me, I've got the complete report on a Minot, North Dakota incident. That was Minot Air Force Base, North Dakota, which happened in August of 1966. Very similar UFOs sighted over missile silos, and also a UFO incident that was investigated by the Air Force immediately after our incident within a week. I'm willing to testify to the truth of all these matters that I've spoken about this in front of Congress under oath.
I was riding a motorcycle not far from here. I saw a large object in the air. It had a perfect geometric shape.
Every person we spoke to in Velikorovice said they saw a flying saucer on that day. They told us it was huge, about 900 feet in diameter. For hours, it hovered over the nearby ballistic missile base, where Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Platunov worked as a missile engineer.
It looked just like a flying saucer, the way they showed them in the movies. No portholes, nothing. The surface was absolutely even. The disc made a beautiful turn like this, on the edge, just like a plane. There was no sound. I had never seen anything like that before.
Lieutenant Colonel Platunov took me to the ruins of what was then a missile silo, with a nuclear warhead pointed at the United States. It was dismantled 3 years ago under an arms reduction treaty. Platunov was in the bunker on that day 12 years ago. In this room were dual control panels for the missile, each hooked up to Moscow. What happened next so alarmed the Soviet military leadership that a 4-man commission was sent the next day to investigate, including Colonel Sokolov.
During this period, for a short time, signal lights on both the control panels suddenly turned on. The lights showing that missiles were preparing for launching, as could normally only happen if an order was transmitted from Moscow.
No one had touched any buttons. No one had entered any codes. And yet, as the UFO hovered over the base, the control panel showed the missiles were preparing to launch. For 15 agonizing seconds, the base lost control of its nuclear weapons. What happened here on that day has never been explained. There were military exercises going on at the time of the incident involving the use of explosives in the air, but they were over 200 miles away. The weather conditions were normal, and when the commission ordered the control panels of the missile base taken apart, piece by piece, nothing was found to be out of order.
Anything I could see, I would go ahead and write down. Structure of craft, fabric, black, smooth, glass-like, surface unknown, identity unknown. I paced off the size of the craft, taking notes on the distance. Size, 9 feet long, approximately 7 to 8 feet high. I couldn't tell what was the front or the back. I had trouble when I was walking around the craft to distinguish engines. Propulsion, unknown. No sound, but apparently operating somehow. Type of aircraft, unknown. I made extra effort to look for the crew compartment or windows or anything like that, or access ports. Could not see any. There was no handles or anything like that. The craft was completely smooth on the outside. Skin fabric of craft, warm. Probably the most startling part of it was the fabric of the craft. Aircraft are metal, and this was maybe metal, but it was very smooth. The fabric seemed like black glass. High electric static on clothes, skin, hair. Identifying markings on left front. That is probably the most compelling thing that said, well, my God, this is from someplace else. Symbols etched or engraved, question mark. Symbols recorded. All I know is I was out there that first night. I know I completed one of the best investigations of my entire military career. This thing wasn't lights in the sky. This was the object, a craft that had landed. I examined it. I walked around it. I felt it. This is an actual event that happened. It doesn't matter what they say. I was there. They weren't. Liftoff, 2:45. No sound. No exhaust. Takeoff unknown. Speed impossible. The takeoff was probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen. With absolutely no sound. It just lifted up maybe 2 or 3 feet, and it did a little bit of maneuvering back in the trees. Momentarily hovered, then in a blink of an eye, it left. Literally a blink of an eye.
Behind me now is a good portion of Salisbury Plain, which is pretty much the home of the British Army's training land. There have been a number of sightings across Salisbury Plain. Yeah, a number of sightings, a number of reports. I received a letter from Mark, who's an ex-British soldier. One night during the winter of 1989-1990, he'd been out on night manoeuvres on Salisbury Plain.
So basically, all it was about 3.5-4K march.
Mark, a former British soldier who was stationed near the Salisbury Plain, has asked that his identity be hidden and his voice disguised. He still fears reprisals from the British Defence Ministry.
So Mark would have been hiking across this open piece of land, and as he approached this copse here, this wooded area here,
we got to near the place where we were going to get picked up, and it's just off to our left.
And then suddenly this massive craft appearing as if out of nowhere.
And it was vast, great big, like triangular craft, and a very strong strobe light beaming down, as if it was looking around for something.
And the next thing Mark can remember is a guy dressed all in black flying suits, coming out of the copse, approaching the 6 soldiers, including Mark, holding this rod or prodding thing.
I felt like a sheep getting penned in with this like cone of light around us, like almost a buzzing feel about it to your body.
As he called it, bluish cone of light that eventually engulfed all 6 soldiers and kind of took over their minds.
Very frightening experience. It's like you got no control over it. Something's controlling you. You have no control over it at all.
As the soldiers sort of woke up from this nightmare experience, they found themselves 600 meters off course over in this direction, wondering where they were and how on earth they got there.
I still had this missing time, which was making me pretty agitated. The feelings that go through my head is I was a guinea pig. I'm really angry about it.
And this is when the captain, our captain of Delta Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Infantry, was walking out from this building to make a speech. And this speech was to advise us of our 6 to 8 weeks training course. And just when he was walking up to this dais of podium to make this speech, I heard this rushing noise.
A rushing noise?
A rushing noise. And I leaned back and I looked across to my left and I saw this bright light, intense bright light. I thought it was a Jeep or a truck or something, and it was moving across slowly. And I saw some of Charlie Company's men running out of their formation, others were standing still. And I wanted to take a better look at this, so I leaned forward. And when I leaned forward, this bright light just got really close, and it was in between the tree lines, or between the tree lines, and I still thought it was a truck. But the light was really, really intense. I mean, it's white, bright light. And I don't know what happened here, but I went unconscious for a few minutes. And when I came to, I was looking downwards and I couldn't move. I couldn't move my feet. And I tried desperately to move from where I was standing. The next thing I did was I could move my upper body, so I turned to my right and I saw someone had been running to the tree lines and others were diving underneath the building into the 2-story high crawl space that you see in the picture. And my buddy, Alan, I think that's his name right now, running. They were all running, so I cried out for Alan to come back and help me because I couldn't move. So he came back and pulled me where I was standing, physically pulled me. He just pulled my arm physically, and I sort of kind of jumped from the position I was standing. And he was asking, he was saying, take cover, and I was asking, what's going on here? Something's happening, and it was happening fast.
I understand that you also heard some screams from those members that were still back on the parade ground, some calling for their mothers.
Yes, sir. That part, it was right after when Sergeant Santini, we saw him coming out from the first building where me and Alan just crossed, and this ball white light from 50 feet where we're laying down, it looked like the size of a melon, a small melon, cantaloupe. But it was a bright white light, and it wasn't a tracer, because I know I've seen tracers before. I fired in my M16s, and I know what tracers look like. But this wasn't no tracer, because it sort of came from the 2nd story, and it sort of roller coaster down to Sergeant Santini's height. And Sergeant Santini's about 5'11", about 5'11", 6 foot. And he was waving up and down his arms, screaming about what's going on, telling us to take cover, and he was cursing the sky because something was coming down. And he started to run. He disappeared from the 2nd building, and this bright light just sort of roller coaster itself down to his height and zipped across, and it disappeared. And the next thing we heard was a slap and a thump. And one of us, Hackett, crawled over to the other side to see where Sergeant Santini was, and he was out on the pavement. He didn't move. Apparently he was knocked out or something. Something hit him. And when he came back, this is when we started hearing screaming from Alpha Company all the way down to Bravo, then to Charlie Company, and to Delta. When I came to Delta Company, we heard somebody out in the parade formation screaming for Mommy. And it went a kind of high-pitched scream and down to a Gretland sort of scream, and I could still hear it when I talk about this. And, you hear a man screaming like that, you know something's going wrong. And I told Jones, who was lying next to me, I told him we should go out there and help these guys because something's going on out there. He just turned around and said, no, they're already dead, forget about it.
we were driven on in, and we stopped at this, there was a line shack out there. We got off the bus, and the entourage was escorted over to where there was a UFO on the ground. There were like 2 Quonset huts and another building, a runway, and we were inside a box canyon. And then from what I could see, we weren't able to get right up with the entourage. The crew was held back, but basically what I was able to see was that there were 2 UFOs in one-piece flight suit. They were probably about 5 feet tall in comparing to the other people around them.
What you mean there was one UFO and there were 2 extraterrestrial
ETs.
beings?
Correct.
Okay. And they were wearing one-piece suits?
One-piece suit, light aluminum colored.
Okay.
Okay. Their skin was a pale color, and as what is typified or called a grayling is what they looked like.
Okay.
The larger head, the large black eyes, small mouth, small nose. And
is this what they would look like or not?
surprisingly, very much so, but the nose is more protruding here and the lips are fuller. Okay. And then the other thing that, and there's an amazing story behind this piece, but as far as the back is very true to what the graylings were like. They have a musculature across the back like this.
Okay.
And the, but very thin-lipped across here. Their arms very thin, and the hands were long and thin. Now, I've been asked many times, were there 4 fingers or 5 fingers? And I said, to be absolutely honest, I have never known that. I never knew to look for that, didn't think about it, okay?
Okay, so are you still in the bus at this time, or are you outside?
No, we're outside.
Okay, but you're
We're
back
outside.
from the group.
We're back from the group.
But you can still see.
We can see, yes.
Okay. And was there any verbal introduction or preamble to what you saw?
Not at all. Where we were put on this was the fact that the way it went, we were not allowed to ever discuss the mission with any of the participants, okay? And basically, when the crew was around, there was no conversation going on about what was going on at the site.
Were you shocked?
Excited, not shocked,
really?
Excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did any of the aliens exchange what you would consider to be eye contact with you?
No, too far away. Okay. But basically, they were very, as I said, they were real thin and long-armed, long hand, longer neck, thin, and their heads were larger.
About how tall?
About 5 feet tall. Okay. But the thing that I saw is when they moved, they were very graceful.
Really?
Very graceful in their movement.
Okay.
And, but that was
So
a very unique.
A non-disclosure during that time? Was that a non-disclosure with a certain length of time?
20 years.
Oh, that was the 20-year one.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So we're past that time, and you got past that time, and then you started speaking out. So this is another incident. Did anything else happen?
Yes.
During that time?
Now, in the fall, I was brought back in and briefed again by the same lieutenant colonel. And he said, same drill, same scenario, signed the form. I did. And anyway, end up back in Andrews Air Force Base. And this time, I'm expecting to see the same people again. Totally different crew. There's a admiral, there's a captain, which is the equivalent of a full colonel in the Air Force. This was basically an all-Navy group with, again, high-ranking civilian engineers and scientists, but none of the same crew. Totally different. But here again, we flew to Wright-Patterson. Here again, they went to the Blue Hangar. We flew to Colorado Springs. They again went up into Cheyenne Mountain. And from there, we went to Los Angeles and took off the next morning, and we flew to Hawaii, landed at Hickam Air Force Base, and we were told, have the airplane ready for leaving at midnight. So we got everything ready, got some rest, back at the airplane, took off at midnight. We flew for somewhere around 3 hours and 45 minutes to maybe 4 hours, and we're flying in a C-118, or what is the equivalent of a DC-6, okay? And 4-engine propeller aircraft. And we landed. And I said, guys, we're back in Hawaii. He says, what do you mean? I says, there is nowhere out there that we can go fly for 3 hours, 45 minutes, 4 hours, and land. Okay? Physically impossible in this airplane. I says, Johnson Island is 5.5 hours. Guam is much more. So, no, we're back in Hawaii somewhere. So, sure enough, again, in which I still do not understand, is that we were all taken together. And we had breakfast, and then we went out to this site that's right by the ocean on the west side because the sun was coming up behind us. And we're looking to the west, and it's an observation deck. And all of us are standing there. And a little after 7 in the morning, about this time, this craft comes out of the water from our left to our right and just goes like this, and then stops out there in front of us. Now, here again, double elliptical saucer-shaped craft, but at the mid-beam on this, there's a light going back and forth like this at the mid-beam on it.
Okay.
Okay, pretty much equal as far as in design, top and bottom, double elliptical. Now, it sits out there and then almost instantaneously disappears. So everybody's excited about what they're seeing and everything. And about this time, somebody yells, it's back. And it's now a little bit closer, about 100 yards out, maybe 100, 200 feet off the water. And it then demonstrates, as far as going up and down, side to side, cants left and right, then cants at an angle and goes right back into the water. Now, when it goes into the water, and when it came out of the water, there was no explosion or implosion as far as it went back in. And
so what was the size of this vehicle? Could you estimate?
Oh, 100 yards out, I'm going to have to guess that this craft was somewhere around, and I'm guessing, I'm saying probably 50 to 60 feet overall length.
Okay.
Okay.
So it wasn't huge.
No. But what was amazing about this, I had the opportunity later on to be able to meet the astronaut, Gordon Cooper. And I had asked him about it, and he said, Bill, it's when you have a electromagnetic propulsion, there's a force field around it. It's like that craft is inside a sandwich, so that when it comes out of it and when it goes back in, you're not going to see the explosion or the implosion. So that was one of the explanations I was trying to find out.
Now, was it your understanding that was flown by extraterrestrial beings, or was that one of ours?
My understanding was that it was ETs, still at the time. Today, we have our own.
Mm-hmm. So it could have been one of ours.
I would say that it was probably a combination.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in '66, it was all a matter of evolvement that's been coming along all the way through. Gordon Cooper talks about the time that he was stationed out at Muroc, which is now Edwards Air Force Base. And he was a major at the time. And one actually landed, and his crew was out there filming brake testing and everything with one of the craft. And they actually caught this craft landing, and the door opening and closing and then taking back off again.
In January of 1978, I was stationed at McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey. One evening, during the time frame of 0300 hours and 0500 hours, there was a number of UFO sightings in the area over the airfield and Fort Dix Army Camp. I am a security policeman and was on routine patrol at the time. New Jersey State Police and Fort Dix MPs were running code in the direction of Brownsville, New Jersey. A state trooper then entered Gate 5 at the rear of the base requesting assistance and permission to enter. I was dispatched and the trooper wanted access to the runway area which led to the very back of the airfield, connected with a heavily wooded area which is part of the Dix training area. He informed me that a Fort Dix MP was pursuing a low-flying object which then hovered over his car. He described it as an oval-shaped with no details and glowing with a bluish-green color. His radio transmission was cut off. At that time, in front of his police car appeared a thing about 4 feet tall, grayish-brown, fat head, long arms, and slender body. The MP panicked and fired 5 rounds from his .45 caliber into the thing, and 1 round into the object above. The object then fled straight up and joined with 11 others high in the sky. This we all saw, but didn't know the details at the time. Anyway, the thing ran into the woods towards our fence line, and they wanted to look for it. By this time, several patrols were involved. We found the body of the thing near the runway. It had apparently climbed the fence and died while running.
In 1978, on January 18th, I was going into the base. Every morning I did the briefing to the general staff, and I noticed that there are some lights off in the distance at the end of the runway there. And when I got into the command post, the senior master sergeant in charge said that there had been UFOs in the pattern all night. They're on radar. The tower had seen them. They got in aircraft reports and so on. And that one had landed or crashed at Fort Dix. Fort Dix and McGuire are right together. And this is kind of like the Roswell of the East. But in any case, an alien had come off the craft and had been shot by a military policeman and apparently was wounded and was heading for McGuire. So for whatever reason, the aliens liked the Air Force better than the Army, perhaps because they're shooting at them. But in any case, our security police went out there and found him on the end of the runway dead. And they asked me to brief the general staff, General Tom Sadler, and at the 8 o'clock stand-up briefing. And I said, I don't think I want to do this. You know, the general doesn't have a good sense of humor, and I'm not sure I believe this. So I did some checking, called the 438th Command Post, and everybody had pretty much the same story. And at 8 o'clock that morning, just before I went on, was going to brief this, and I was very worried about it. They said, don't brief it, that it's too hot, so to speak. That's pretty much my story, and I'm prepared to tell the story in front of Congress, and it is the truth.
I was a navigator in various aircraft, tanker and transport aircraft, flew last in C-141s at McGuire Air Force Base. I was also an intelligence officer most of my career as my desk job, so to speak. And I, in that period, frequently, briefed generals and congressmen on our capabilities and the threat to our forces. Well, I was normally, like I mentioned, a briefing officer, and I would come to work 4 o'clock or so in the morning. And on the morning of January 18th, 1978, I drove through the main gate at McGuire, and I noticed that there was red lights out on the runway, and that probably something was going on out on the runways there because of all the red lights and, like police cars and fire trucks and so on. And didn't think too much about it until I got to 21st Air Force command post is where I worked, and I would go in there and prepare a briefing for the generals. I was a deputy director of intelligence for 21st Air Force, which controlled, well, half the military aircraft and flew the presidents and various VIPs and from the Mississippi River around to India. We had some 300 aircraft, and we were flying all kinds of missions, submarine crews, almost anything that had to do with the military airlift we accomplished. And this particular morning when I went into the command post, I was met by the head of the command post, and he said that it's been a very exciting evening, that we've had UFOs in the, over the McGuire all night, and that one had apparently landed or possibly crashed at Fort Dix, and that when a military policeman came upon the alien, that he had pulled out a gun and shot them. And I said, a foreigner, like, an alien? I was a little bit confused by him saying alien. He says, no, an alien from outer space. He was very specific about the fact that an alien from outer space had been shot at Fort Dix, and that it had run away after being wounded and headed for McGuire. Now, McGuire and Fort Dix just have a fence between them, and this alien supposedly climbed the fence or went under it or whatever and got to McGuire and died out on the end of the runway. And that the security police were out there and had captured the body, so to speak, and were guarding it. And he said that a C-141 from Wright-Patterson was coming in to pick up the plane. Now that made me stand up because I didn't realize that Wright-Patterson had C-141s. I thought Military Airlift Command was the only one who owned C-141 aircraft. So I was like, my gosh, what's going on here? And he says, we want you to brief this at the, stand-up general briefing this morning and explain what happened to everybody. And I was like, do you want me to tell General Tom Sadler and everybody in the command post that, we captured an alien? And they said, yes, we want you to brief that this morning. Well, I did some checking around, and I called the 38th Military Airlift Wing Command Post to check with them to see if, in other words, the story was the same that I was getting. And they said yes, that they had heard that also, that this actually did happen, that an alien was found on the base. And later that morning, I was told that they decided not to brief it in the stand-up briefing. And so I didn't actually brief it. Now, the only other thing that was interesting is that that morning I carried what's code word down to the General Sadler's office, and I noticed some commotion going on in there, and that some of the security police people were there in rather disheveled and so on, and that General Sadler was a stickler for everybody looking perfect, and it was kind of surprising to see these people that obviously needed shaves and were in fatigues and so on there. So then I knew that that might tie into the story that I had heard. Now, after the briefing, I also went to the photo lab. Almost every day I went to the photo lab because in your briefings you have, 4 screens, and you have to keep them all, filled up with pretty pictures and so on. And there they indicated that they had taken pictures of something extraordinary. And I said, well, let me see them. And the sergeant was handing it to me, and his master sergeant says he can't see those. So all I know is that they had some pictures that I wasn't allowed to see. But normally, being the general's briefer, I had never been, stopped from seeing any pictures that they had previously. There is nuclear assets on the base that they used to carry weapons back and forth to Europe and so on. I had done some checking around because I became interested. I talked to one of the security policemen who claims to have been out there, and he indicated that he essentially saw a small body that could have been like a child, but it seemed to have a larger than normal head. Now, one interesting thing is many of the key personnel on the base at that time who had a connection to this were quickly transferred from the wing commander on down, indicating that if you knew something, they tended to split you up, so to speak, so you couldn't talk about it. Within a matter of weeks or whatever. Now, the security policeman told me that he was transferred within a few days. Matter of fact, he was taken to Wright-Patterson within the day or two and debriefed by a number of people and essentially told not to talk about it anymore. Now, his story to me was that, they heard this going on the radios, and they heard that this chase was on, that the alien had been shot at Fort Dix and they were chasing it towards McGuire. At least for whatever reason, it chose to run towards McGuire Air Force Base, and that both the state police and the military police were, you might say, chasing this person or alien, whoever it was. They came from what looked like a UFO. As I understand, it was a disc-shaped craft. They indicated to me that the UFOs had been in the area for quite some time that evening, and that they had them on radar, and that the tower operator had seen them, and some of the other aircraft in the area had apparently seen them as well. 6 or 8 people guarding the body. And then there was the commander of the security police unit, and then we were told, a few of us in the command post, and I assume that General Sadler was briefed about it. Well, I happened to meet a lady who claimed to have been out of White Sands, and it was an engineer working out there, and she was out hiking one day, and she told me that her and a couple of her friends had come up to the top of a hill, and they could look down in this valley, but only their heads were showing, on the top of the hill. They just happened to be looking over and down the way the path was. And they had seen a UFO on the ground with a couple little aliens kind of like picking up rocks and stuff. And they watched it for an extensive period. It was, several hundred yards away from them. And they got a pretty good look at it. And eventually the aliens did see them. And they jumped in the craft and took off.